10%.
Let me work it out with you guys. All right, let's do it together, just to help you out. So sales, so we have, let's say, year 1 and year 2, right? So this will be the variable costing approach. So sales, give me the sales in year 1.
$1 million.
And it's $1.5 million in year 2, right?
Yeah.
So let's work it out together. This is good. Let's see if I can help you. Okay. Now we're going to need also, what I'm going to need to know, and you should need to know, is the number of units in each one of these things. How many units were actually sold in this case?
20,000.
Okay. So I'm going to have to erase this. I need more room, so we don't need this anymore. I think you know this. Sales? Okay. So let's start with the, this is going to be the new approach. So we're going to need to know two kinds of variable cost, variable selling and variable manufacturing, okay? So let's start with variable manufacturing. And this is going to consist of direct material per unit, direct labor per unit, and variable overhead per unit. What does that come out to?
20 to 400,000.
What is it?
Oh, okay, fine.
So it's basically, how many units here?
It's 20,000 times $20 per unit of variable
Okay.
manufacture.
And how many units are sold here? 25,000 or something?
No, 30.
30,000 units times 20. So what I'm going to do is draw an arrow. So the first number is going to be, this number will go into year 1, obviously. And that looks like, with my simple calculation, that's $400,000. So this is $400,000. And this is going to be $600,000, correct? Okay. Now we also need variable selling and administrative.
So is that 3 times 20,000?
Yes,
But, okay, so I didn't understand that footnote. There, you're supposed to do both.
yes.
It's not like the 3, okay.
So basically 20,000 times, what is it, 3?
Mm-hmm.
So we know that's going to be 60,000. And we know 20,000, 30,000 times 3, that's correct. It's going to be 90,000. So let's total. We have 1 million minus these two.
500.
So this is going to be contribution margin. It's going to be, for the first one, it's going to be 1 million times, it's going to be 540,000. And for the second one, it's going to be
810.
okay, and finally, we're going to have the fixed manufacturing overhead and fixed selling and administrative.
So it's minus 350 and minus 250 for the first.
Minus 350 and how much?
Minus 2 and another 250.
No, wait, why is it 350?
I think it's the same each year is my guess. Is it the same each year, guys?
Wait, so the fixed manufacturing
The same each year. I think it,
350 is a fixed manufacturing.
they keep it the
doesn't
same.
having nothing to do with how many you sold.
No,
Exactly.
that's the point.
The human.
That's precisely why it's deducted as it's not put into the product under this approach, because it's not affected by the unit sold.
And then,
All right, so in this case, it's the same thing, right, guys?
Separate costs.
So each year, the fixed costs remain the same. And now I want the net income. Give me the net income. I'm too late. This is
This
a
should be
minus.
minus
This is
60.
minus 60,000 net income in this one. And this one is 600, so it looks like it's positive. It looks like 210,000. All right. Now, so that's the so-called variable costing approach? A lot. All you have to remember is the goal is the key number is this number. This is it. This is the number, contribution margin. That's the number we want to work with as economists, as manager accountants. We want to know what the incremental profit is of these units. Incremental profit. Fixed costs don't change. So this is the lever we're moving. We're saying, well, can we lower our variable costs? Can we sell more units? These are the levers we're trying to pull and push to get our profit up. Fixed costs you can lower your fixed costs, great, but by its very nature, sometimes it's hard, like you have to get rid of a whole building. I mean, these are costs that are not as easy sometimes to get rid of. Maybe in the long run you can create a new factory, you can get new machines, whatever, but the fixed costs are much harder to manipulate, especially in the near term. So we treat those as, this is the objective. Get over the hump. Get enough contribution margin so that you can cover those fixed costs. All right, so finally now let's reconcile it, all right?
Question, sorry. Do you have to use your 210 from year 2 to cover the 60 shortfall from year 1?
What do you mean you have to use it?
I mean, is that what happens basically?
Well, yeah. I mean, but again, and yes, you can think of it that way. That's the second year they were clearly more profitable, and ultimately you can't live on deficits your whole life. You have to cover them.
So at some point, would you say that really your net income for that year is 150?
No. It's each year stands on its own, and it's in the way we analyze things. No, they had a good year the second year, and you want to know why? Their sales went up. That's it.
Okay.
All right. So now the final piece of this is you tell me what caused these differences. We see. Okay, go back to the absorption. I see 10,000 in year 1, 140 in year 2. Okay. So this is the final piece of this. Let's make sure you can tell me why is there these differences.
Why it's 10,000 and then 140?
Yeah. So if I'm looking at the first year. Let's do the first year. First year I see that the absorption costing is $10,000 more. I'm sorry, it's $70,000 more than the variable costing. $70,000 more. And tell me quickly, what's causing that difference? Go ahead.
$70,000 worth of overhead costs that were allocated to goods that weren't sold.
The 5,000
Right.
pieces of whatever that we're producing.
Right. Yes. So the critical factor is always going to be units sold versus units produced. That's always the reason. Times the overhead cost per unit. That's going to be the critical calculation. So
It's the $14
Yes.
fixed.
exactly. So they sold in this first year. They produced, and you can see that on the next page. Take a look at the next page if you would. Year 1, they produced 25,000 units, but only sold 20. That means 5,000 units are ending up in ending inventory. And those 5,000 units in ending inventory under the absorption costing approach are each one is taking $14 of cost into the balance sheet. That is not being treated in the income statement. So quick calculation, 5,000 less 14 is a 70,000 difference. Net income under absorption has to be higher because you're deferring $70,000. But look what happens the next year. Well, the next year they produced 25, but now what's happened? Well, they've sold 30. So they not only are going to deduct under the absorption method, they're deducting all the overhead from the current year because they sold everything they produced. But they're also taking into the income statement some of the overhead from last year. Namely, those 5,000 units that were not sold last year are now, they're bringing their overhead into the cost of goods sold in the next year. So what you're seeing is the next $70,000 higher under the variable costing. That's the real difference.
So,
Everything, and again, if you check on your own, every other line item it doesn't appear in the same place, but under the old and new approach will be deducted in exactly the same amounts. The only difference is the fixed overhead. That's the critical difference in these two methods. So, you know,
Fixed
obviously,
overhead, but what about variable overhead? Is that
variable
that
overhead
subtract-
is
part
deducted
of
exactly
that.
the same amount under the old and new approach.
So it's all, COGS includes all the variable costs
Yes.
plus any fixed costs that are managed.
Right, so under both approaches, that's right, under both approaches, all the variable costs are the same under both approaches. Fixed selling administrative are the same under both approaches. The only thing that differs is fixed manufacturing overhead. Okay? All right. Take a few minute break. Are you ready to plow on? Now we're gonna. I was late. I know you guys are being very nice and kind, but I still feel badly. It's, I'll have to do something. It changes my whole way of approaching getting into New York now. It never occurred to me that I would be blocked from going into the Lincoln Tunnel. It never occurred to me. So going forward, I'll rethink that. But I will stay a little later, keeping you from your families. I apologize. You can blame me. But I would like to, I know you're all tired also, I understand. Let's move on though. We would normally end about now, so I want to move on to at least 4:30, which is what I suggested. You okay with that?
Yeah, I gotta get out of here at 4.
Don't worry about it.
We can take a 5-minute.
Take a 5-minute break, and then I will proceed to go through to 4:30, okay?
I gotta go back to Green now. Schlep out there. So close but so far.
I know. What do you take? Obviously you train.
Take 100 it's 45 minutes. And then train to the house.
That's 45 minutes, really, even on a weekend?
45 minutes, it's like regular. Yeah, you could catch express trains in the morning
Right.
to Manhattan for like 20 minutes.
The bus must take a long time, obviously, but you don't want to take buses.
But you can't take the bus to
So you guys been getting a little more snow than we have? Is it because I keep seeing different snowstorms seem to hit the tip of the island more than these last.
We got some like last night.
Yeah.
Pretty light. Wasn't been that bad. Just ice everywhere.
Yeah.
Ice everywhere.
No, it's been tough winter.
We've had to. We can't close a couple of environmental reports because there's just blocks of ice on the sidewalk. You can't dig under.
No.
And like last week we had our super and a couple of guys just chop it all up.
So that's slowing down the part of the deal, obviously.
But you can't get the environmental sign off.
Yeah, and that has to be signed off on.
Yeah, they have to go in there and I guess pile into the ground.
I know. Well, look, as bad as we are, we have friends in Boston. I'm sure we all
Oh
do.
my god, yeah.
I mean, they're losing. They have like roof problems.
Seriously.
One friend of mine's got a flood coming in his house because of the ice dam in the roof.
My parents live in Boston.
Oh, really?
They
Goodness.
said it's like,
Nightmare.
they just like literally can't anymore.
No,
They
it's not.
shovel and then it snows again, they shovel.
My wife and I have been thinking where we're going to retire. I tell you, New England is out.
No, who retires there?
No, you'd be surprised.
It's
Well, some
really?
people like, some people like.
Maine or something?
Well, Maine. Some people like being near Cape Cod or whatever.
Oh, it's the case?
Berkshires, absolutely, Berkshires. That's one of the places. Lennox, no question. I love every year they have the concerts there. I love that area.
Me too. For a summer home.
Right.
Summer home, but not winter. Forget.
I wouldn't think of like the Boston area as a place to retire. It's a
No, it's
high
not.
cost of living.
It's a
and-
good place if you can afford it. You have two homes. You have one in Boston and one in Florida or maybe Arizona. I guess.
Well, that's like the deal.
Yeah, no, I understand. That's the old. Or you rent a place, maybe you rent it. You don't have to live there. You don't have to buy a place. It's really good.
But you know, for places like that, what they charge you for the on-season ends up covering basically your costs, your, what's that thing that you have to pay? Mortgage costs?
Yeah,
That's like the way that they,
right.
charge you.
It's it's definitely a challenge to figure out where, you know, because the weather does change, you know, you think,
California.
okay.
California is the move.
No, I would not go to, you know, California, forget, I would not go to California.
Too far.
No, no, not just that.
Earthquakes?
I've never, every time I look in the news, there's like
Fires.
mudslides, fires, now there's this Pineapple Express, I don't know if you heard about that, you heard about that, the
It's
Pineapple
a
Express?
movie.
No, it's a pineapple, they call this, they had this horrible
Something.
wind
Yeah.
thing up there, they called it the Pineapple Express from the south.
Oh,
that
they
was
got like hot winds.
causing
like
tremendous
80
amounts of
degrees.
rain, like they had like,
Oh yeah, they had a rainy week. You know, they don't go to, my friends don't go to work when it rains there.
I don't know,
It's
it's
insane.
flooded, I know, things get flooded.
No, it's just because it's like their
I
snow.
love California.
Oh, I see.
They're just so, they're used to such good weather. It's like
You know,
rains and it's like, oh.
the safest place in terms of weather, and I'm probably gonna jinx it, is Arizona. I mean, it's all, you know what you're getting, you may not like it. You get that horrible, the summers are horrible, you know, you can't,
I love that.
oh, do you like 100,
I'm
it's
from El
110?
Paso, so it's the same.
Oh, okay, so you're,
120, yeah.
you like
Dry.
It's either hot or hell. That's what you have. Those
Right.
are your seasons.
That's funny. Well, I prefer just, I live with hot, but not that.
Yeah, the summers are like 120 and dry heat.
Unbelievable.
But everything's organized around that, Florida too. Here it's like, it's
Florida's
hot,
very
but not
cold.
every place has air conditioning. It's cold, but you have to like park 5 blocks from where you have to be. In Florida, you go from your air conditioned car to your air, like everything's
That's how Texas and Arizona
Plan.
are. Yeah.
Yeah, the subways here.
Well, also Arizona, I mean, the Southwest is not humid like Florida.
Right.
But it's
This
not
is a
old.
place-
The places aren't like as old, so the infrastructure's all better to deal
Where
with.
can you go skiing and jet skiing in the same day? Other than California.
Is there?
Yep. You go to Bear Mountain, you
Yeah.
go skiing, you go down to.
No, yeah, I
And
love,
the beach.
don't get me wrong, I
It's
love
crazy.
California, I love what you're saying, I mean, you go to San Francisco, there's nothing like it, you're at the ocean and you see the mountains all in the same place. The coolness is always cool. I experienced one earthquake, we experienced an earthquake in our honeymoon, believe it or not. We were out in, where were we when the earthquake occurred? San Francisco.
I love Northern
And
California.
then, like, it wasn't, I mean,
I haven't done Northern California.
as earthquakes go, it wasn't horrible, it was like
I hate it.
5.5, which is not horrible, but in the middle of the night, I'll tell you, it's pretty scary.
I like Bear Mountain. Big Bear.
I love Maine. Maine is one of the most, amazing states. It's just so, but it's, again, the winter, forget the winters, but,
I've never been to Maine.
no, Maine is a,
Summer.
Beautiful.
Summer goes. For summer. Yeah, if you live
Yeah,
there.
summer's
If you
beautiful.
live there all year round. It's
and and not that this should be a reason, but they have storms in Maine in the summer that are beautiful. I mean, you have these, these lightning thunderstorms, these like, I see this protracted lightning and this long thunderclap, but it's exciting in its own way, and it's very natural up there, is what I'm saying. You feel like you're sort of back in time.
That's so romantic.
You'd be surprised.
You're also probably in a different mode when you're up there.
Yeah. No, it's
There are nice things to
very
enjoy
natural.
also when you're not in the city, but out a
Yeah,
little
well,
further in New York, but you're
yeah.
on your work time.
Right.
Is there a lot of people who could just do that? They don't need to live, with the cell phone all the time. Life is just so simple.
Well, look, people like hiking. We like hiking, so Maine would be it's a good hiking place. Cool. It's cool.
Maybe in the Adirondack.
I like New York State. I like the Adirondacks. We had a house up in in Woodstock.
My brother
Not the which everyone thinks is where the concert took
It
place.
wasn't, I know.
It's not there, but
Woodstock is such a cute town.
it is a cute town. I'm actually glad for this administration, they're supposedly not fracking in New York State, which I think is important for New York State, right?
They're not right.
They're not fracking.
Or money in front.
No, I know. Although now with the price of oil, I wonder how that's impacted fracking.
makes the real estate super expensive. Everybody's trying to buy that.
Okay, we'll start in a minute. Okay, still in the second. But this chapter has one other element to it I wanted to briefly discuss. And you should be interested in this because this is where some decision making comes in. Finally, we're looking at some decision making issues. So let's say your company has multiple divisions and the question comes up, should we dump a division? Should we get rid of a division? How do you measure that? How should you measure that? Well, certainly, we would think, and on the first hand, that any division that has a positive contribution margin is a good thing because they're covering some of their fixed costs. But what is the appropriate approach is you should probably try to take your fixed costs and create what they call traceable fixed costs to each division. So you've got traceable fixed costs and common fixed costs. And so the question is, how do you know which division you should get rid of? Well, if a company contribution margin covers its traceable fixed cost, then it's contributing to the bottom line. It means if you get rid of this division, say you got rid of this division, you would lose money. You would lose $60,000. Now this seems like clearly it looks like these are both profitable, but sometimes if you start allocating a lot of cost to each division, it makes some divisions look unprofitable. So the natural tendency is to look at a bottom line of divisions after allocating overhead, including common costs, to each division using some arbitrary approach. So that could make certain divisions look much unprofitable when in fact they are covering their traceable fixed costs. So be aware, the message here is be aware of allocating common fixed costs just because there's a tendency in human nature to allocate everything. So allocate common fixed costs to each division because that could very well make a division look like it's losing money and you get rid of it, when in fact the only thing that's truly relevant to you, or should be relevant, is whether its contribution margin covers its traceable fixed costs.
Well, there are other factors, like, let's say you get, like, the television division isn't covering its fixed costs, but
Traceable fixed costs.
the traceable fixed costs, but it is bringing in customers for the computer. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, you can bring in some things like there's some negative synergies, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, like
Something
for the
there's some negative
hospital, the
synergies?
OBGYN department loses money, but you can't not
Right.
have an OBGYN department because then you don't have a pediatric.
No, I understand,
either.
this is a simple case where, but you're right, you have to factor in the synergies, the interactions, the interaction between products, okay? That's what the synergies are. But on the surface, this is your basic analytical approach to the question: should we dump a division? No, if they cover their traceable fixed costs. All things equal. Okay, so that's pretty much so. And common costs should not be allocated to these divisions because these costs remain even if you got rid of the divisions. All right, so those are the main messages from chapter 5. I think are well absorbed, excuse the pun. Okay, so I'm ready now. Questions on chapter 5? I mean, these are the two main messages I wanted you to get a hold of. How to measure the difference between what I call the old and the new approach. I think you now fully understand that. Also, how to make decisions when it comes to getting rid of divisions in a multi-division firm. And basically, this is the message that you should take away. So it's very dangerous to allocate common costs. I mean, these are things that we see all the time in the real world, but they don't necessarily lead to optimal decisions, unfortunately. They sometimes lead to
And
suboptimal.
Common costs are not part of
Like,
the
I'll give you-
traceable fixed
No,
costs?
like the president's salary of the whole company.
Right.
That would be a common cost.
And we haven't seen, common costs in anything that we've done yet, so?
Well,
They were absorbed into the.
we've seen it, and
numbers.
it's been
That's
sort
right,
of.
in the homework, it was the cost that wasn't allocated.
The only thing you've really seen, okay, you saw in chapter 4, we saw allocation of fixed overhead, and that's manufacturing cost. But you haven't really seen common versus non-common costs broken down that way. This is the first time we're really talking about that. Okay, so I'm done with this chapter, and now I want to proceed into the next chapter, which is the more modern way of dealing with this issue you guys, you can hang in there? I know you must be exhausted.
So we have 3 and 4 due next week.
Yeah,
Okay.
3, 4, and 5.
We're gonna finish 5 today?
No, 3
We're not meeting next week.
No, I know not. We did
So
3.
we
3
did-
was due
Oh,
today.
2, 3. Okay, so we just have
4
Four
and
and
5.
4 and 5. And again, you have an extra week. We're not meeting next week.
Right.
One of the reasons we're meeting later is so we don't have to meet every other week. So,
But you're not gonna get through chapter 6 for us to have to do chapter 6 too.
no, you wouldn't remember. What did I tell you about
I
chapter
know,
6?
but still, okay.
I'm just going to cover as much of chapter 6 as reasonably coverable in the short time we have left. Meaning, I'll be like that auctioneer.
Wait, we're getting through 5 and part of 6 today?
We've done 5.
Oh, that was
We're
fun.
done.
Oh, that was fun.
We're now moving on to 6. 5, we've covered the main. Okay, thank you. The main issue in chapter 5, the 2 issues we've covered exactly the way I wanted to. The way I didn't rush, I didn't change. This is exactly what I wanted to do, and I've done it. Cover the reconciliation, and also look at the segment, how to make a decision. So now, I'm moving on to chapter 6, which is the, quote, modern way approach that people are using now to allocate overhead. This is, finally we're getting to the, quote, desirable way of allocating overhead. This is called ABC, activity-based costing. And let me just summarize what activity-based costing really does, so I think you'll see the big picture. So far we've seen that companies have you kind of alluded to it, Johanna, this issue of you have fixed manufacturing overhead. You have fixed selling and administrative. These are fixed costs, so they by their very nature, they're very hard to allocate to products. How do you allocate fixed costs to products in a reasonable, meaningful way? Okay? We've seen attempts to allocate this amount to the products using predetermined overhead rates. This was part of the numerator in the predetermined overhead rate. We've seen that. Is that the right approach? Not according to this chapter. This chapter basically is looking at things differently. The reason is very simple. First of all, we want to allocate if we can, we want to allocate both of these to the products, but in a non-arbitrary way. We would like to to the extent it's a common cost, we're not going to allocate common costs ever. But to the extent we can take this overhead cost and we can break it down into much more reasonable cause and effect relationships with production. As best we can, we're going to be able to come up with a better way of measuring things, okay? And so that's what ABC tries to do. It tries to take both elements of this and find a way to allocate it to the products. Now, in a way that makes sense. Now, the approach we looked at in chapter 4 used the so-called predetermined overhead rate, and if you recall, we typically focused on one type of driver, namely something like labor hours was our cost driver, or machine hours. I think in another example we used machine hours. So we had, if you remember the formula, we had the expected overhead in the numerator divided by one type of driver. Could have been labor hours could have been machine hours, correct? That implies, you think about it carefully, that implies that all overhead is driven by hours, labor hours.
I thought we did it by units.
No, we did it by hours. Labor hours, machine hours. Typically, the predetermined overhead rate was equal to, if you look at it, go back to all of our examples.